Hey everyone, welcome back to Behind the GM Screen. I'm Richard.
Sakura Draven.
And today we are talking about story weaving. Or to elaborate the title that we thought was not going to be good as it was too long, weaving the player decisions back into the story that you're running. So, what do you think about railroading?
It's a quick way to get a player to be frustrated with the game and have negative experiences and not want to play anymore.
Yeah. I've said that I'm a bad player sometimes, yes. And one of the quickest ways to get me to come up with reasons to not be able to ever play a game again is if I feel like my decisions as a player are being ignored and that the story is going to happen the same way no matter what I do.
Yes.
And that happens even in video games. If in a video game I do something and the game lets me think that I had agency, that I could make a decision that mattered. If they ignore it in the rest of the game, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm out of the game.
Of course. And there's the difference in why we are playing at a table with a group of people weaving a story than in a video game.
At least that should be the difference.
Yes. It's not always what happens.
It's not always what happens. So I knew it. So I think that what story weaving can truly contribute to the game, because many GMs would like if the players just took the bait, did the thing that they were supposed to do, and called it done.
It'd be nice once in a while.
You think it would be, but the advantage of story weaving is when the players do something unexpected, and if you have an idea what the rest of the world is like, the rest of the world being what the players can't see. The players can't see what's happening in the room next to them,
right.
But the players decide to go in that room. And if you already have this idea that there's a group of criminal underworld people playing cards in that room, it's magical. Mm-hmm. They may have never gone there, but they did. What happens now? When that happens, it offers an opportunity to tell stories that are truly unique and memorable, and the players suddenly forget that they're sitting at a table and they start to think, my character's there. And there's a whole world to experience and explore. And that's not really true. But there's enough of the world that if you truly know your material, that you can give them. You can give them more exposure than what they expected.
Absolutely.
So we had a few scenarios, and we thought we'd share a couple stories. And as we go through, we may probably meander a little bit, as we do.
As you shared gaming stories, there's always rambling.
Always rambling. But this is just the first of probably a few times we revisit this topic, because I think, like we started off with, this is why people quit playing. And they say, this hard-coded experience that ignores what I want to do is inferior to a video game. And I often feel like it's inferior. Like when I'm being railroaded, I will just say, if with a video game, it has graphics and special effects, and I don't have to I don't leave socially exhausted.
Right.
The only advantage of tabletop role-playing is the interactive storytelling.
Absolutely.
So people would say, but it's also social. Yeah, but I could just drink at my bar. Mm-hmm. I don't need this. I could drink socially while playing a video game. So it's the storytelling that is unique to this medium, and I just love it so much. And I feel sad when people are really experiencing a board game of the mind. And that's okay. They can have fun however they want to have fun. but the storytelling is what I love the most.
Yes.
So did you want to start us off with a story, or you want to skip straight to a scenario?
Let's go straight to a scenario.
All right. So you're running the game, and you have this idea that the players have to get through maybe a captain of the guard, through a gate. And you, in your head, you're like, these guys are always going to give them like a tough time. And the players murder them and hide the body. And you're like, well, okay, that's not what would ever happen in real life. Like, if I did that at Sam's Club, there'd probably be consequences. Mm-hmm. So how do you handle that scenario when somebody that you had kind of like a fleshed out story, you thought this was going to go somewhere, they're a recurring character, and they murder them?
Well, I think we've all been in the tables where unexpectedly an NPC dies, and you can see it on the GM's face. For me, I had a NPC in mind that I wanted to do a lot with, and the players did murder him almost outright.
Yeah.
Because they weren't listening to the clues. And so instead of being upset about that, well, now the NPC has a brother that's going to hunt the players and figure out what happened. And it creates, well, I didn't have this fully fleshed out to begin with, but now your decisions have now created something hunting you, or someone. Depends.
I think that's a fantastic way of flipping the tables. Mm-hmm. Because normally the players are hired to murder some villains. And in a sense, to the family of that murdered NPC,
yes,
the players are the villains. Mm-hmm. And to randomly get ambushed, and they're like, wait, we're trying to like solve the mystery of the prince's like I don't know, corruption. So us being ambushed must be related to that. Oh no.
Yeah.
No, that you're being ambushed because of your actions 2 adventures ago.
Yes. And it can create player paranoia, which I love.
Yeah.
But also it makes them a little more conscious of their decisions, but it can create something really fun and unexpected down the line for both the GM and the players. And maybe they explain what happened and they can convince the brother that it was an accident. I always give my players a chance to talk their way out of a fight. Or maybe they then murder the brother, and I'll just keep expanding it, but
sure.
It's those things where, yeah, I had an NPC and he got murdered. So then the NPC ended up not with a brother, but it was a sister that was hunting for the answers, and I kept her just in and out of where they were going for like many scenarios, and they didn't understand where this was coming from because they didn't remember.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, as a GM, you can create depth to your game with that simple technique.
I think the key there is to enjoy it as the GM, not get frustrated, because it's so easy. You have all the power.
Yeah.
I actually think the GM has some of the least amount of power. And we can have like a whole topic about that.
Oh, that's a topic.
Yeah. But I think that the GM can get angry and then think, I'm going to punish the players for their actions immediately.
Right.
And so they go to the next town and suddenly they're ambushed.
Yes.
And they're like, and he's like, yeah, see, like, now you learned not to do that again. Well, no, that's not how life works.
No.
It takes time.
Absolutely.
If you ever go into the shady parts of town to hire someone to murder someone, it's not quick to hire like the best of the best. You get to like the lamos first. So it doesn't make sense for them to get ambushed necessarily right away by somebody important with lots of resources. So drag it out. Drag it out over many, many games. And that's what breeds in the depth, because one scenario, one encounter, they're probably not even going to realize what happened or care.
Yeah.
They're just going to think free experience or something. Except in White Wolf, you don't even get experience for combat. So that's...
I have amended rules, but that's another scenario.
Oh, I mean, but it's up to you.
Yeah.
As GM, as opposed to a more combat-based role-playing game where the mere act of shedding blood gives you experience points.
Yeah.
So...
And being an adaptive GM, remember, you do hold the secrets. If they didn't know that NPC was going to be someone of importance, change the story and reinvent that NPC somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's never a real loss to you.
Exactly. You have infinite numbers of
But
NPCs.
Utilizing it to show the players that there are deeper storylines, deeper consequences to just murdering a random guard, or what they perceived as a random guard, will then later on make them question their choices. And that's always a beautiful thing to see. So
the second scenario we have is, what if the player betrays the quest giver? So they've recovered the crown and they're supposed to bring it back to the Duke. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, the crown is actually probably worth more than whatever it is that Duke was supposed to give them. So instead they're like, yeah, we're just going to melt it down and sell it off. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, whether the crown was originally stolen and the Duke is a good person, or the Duke is a criminal and he's trying to claim kingdom by having the crown. It happens that mercenaries turn on their employer.
Oh yes.
But if you're not ready for it as the GM, it can wreck your next storyline that you might have put a lot of work into.
I always try to be ready for it, and that may be because I run...
What does that say about your players?
It may be because I run primarily a pirate game. So at the base level of my game, the players never know who's an ally and who's an enemy. Mm-hmm. So my prime example is the very first mission that I always run with new groups. The mission giver is a pirate captain that the players know is significant, and he sends them off to recover a ship that's faster than his. And the players have two choices. They are led to believe that they need to recover the goods without using cannons on the ship because the cargo is precious. And then they are to return it to his hiding place. Mm-hmm. Well, if the players decide, and this has happened, if the players decide to use cannons during the combat, I only remind them of that once. Mm-hmm. If they decide to use cannons and the precious cargo is harmed, or they decide that they want to just take everything and go because they've already been paid, that NPC becomes an enemy, a very powerful enemy. Mm-hmm. Or that NPC, if they return the cargo unharmed, that NPC becomes their greatest ally. So I'm always prepared for both sides of it, because I've had too many players who take an NPC and they're not necessarily playing an evil game. Yeah. But they'll unexpectedly be like, well, let's just keep the money and the loot and just sail off into the sunset. Okay. So I've learned that I need to adapt, that my NPCs can go either way.
I definitely think that you mentioned paranoia before. And I think that a lot of GMs use the tool of paranoia all the time. Maybe too often. Often players...
Oh yes, I've gamed under a few GMs that are masters at paranoia. And it just means that we're going to spend 45 minutes deciding how we're going to get into the building. Yeah. Instead of just going for it.
Oh man, we could definitely have a topic about that, because I feel like as a player that's frustrating, and as a GM that's frustrating.
It's a balance.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times paranoia becomes so extreme that the players don't even trust anybody. Like, if they get hired, the employer must be corrupt in some way.
I've seen that too. Not by my means,
Yeah.
but I've seen that from other GMs. I've been that player.
I mean, I have players who sit down and they're like, oh, this guy's going to screw us, or this, like, wait a minute here. This is not the world. like it makes sense in some games, but in other games you're like, this is court.
Yeah.
You're all supposed to be allies here. This is like Camelot. No, there's corruption in Camelot. But like, just imagine this is some sort of like upbeat TV show where everybody likes each other.
Yeah.
And the enemies are outside the building.
Yes.
But no, sometimes that like the player's just like, well, no, we can betray this person because they were going to betray us first. And so, yeah, they're not necessarily an evil campaign.
Yes.
But they're kind of going that way.
That's definitely, the paranoia is definitely another topic.
Yeah, yeah.
Because utilizing it as a GM is beneficial. Because it makes the players question their decisions. And that is a good thing. Because that creates depth. Then they're not looking at the story as, I'm going to kill it. And then I'm going to take the treasure. I'm going to kill that. Then they start to, okay, if you want to run a surface level hack and slash, but that's not the type of GM I am.
Yeah. I mean, because I've ran so many games, I just, and honestly, I enjoy a good dungeon crawl.
It has its place.
I've said in the very first episode, I think that we would rotate whole game system. So it was like every 3 to 6 months, we're switching between a White Wolf style game to a D&D style game to a old school, what they call old school, like kind of basic D&D type game where it's beyond basic. There's like nothing extra. It's just your 6 stats, and what do you do with your sword?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of options for dialogue there because there's no skill system to support you getting what you want by words, and it takes a lot of trust between the players and the GM to say, yeah, I believe my character would trust what you say, but then also ignoring the fact that, like, well, your character is a dwarf and you're talking to an elf. So basically, no matter what you say, that elf's not going to trust you. There's like all kinds of crazy stuff when you go into a system that has no rules
Yes.
for handling social interaction. And there's like no good, there's no way to roll dice to decide. I mean, you can, but you might as well roll a D4 or D20 or D100 or flip a coin.
And that's where the skills of a GM learning to weave those little decisions become important.
I actually like I like those old, what they call the OGS or whatever, or OSG, OSG games that have no rules, because it does really, it forces you to have these kind of tough conversations. And pretty soon, like, because the combat's fast, you either die or win off of a couple rolls. It's not like D&D 45-minute combat. No. You're either gonna like I've lost so many characters to wasps. It's like when they do 1 point of damage every round and you have no fire to like get rid of them, you just die. That's it. Apparently that's gonna happen in the US with
I was just gonna say
Asian killer wasps.
Let's not talk about the real world news now.
But yeah, like it just becomes interesting, and the GM has to work harder. But that means that these scenarios of the players just doing what they want is like, it's something the GM should be ready to handle.
Yes.
And should enjoy it, I think.
Yes.
So the third scenario is, what if the player heads somewhere entirely off of the map? So you've fully fleshed out the town, you know everybody who lives there. You're thinking in your head, the next 3 weekends, we are going to do adventures in this town, and then they're going to get on a boat and go to the next wherever. I don't know where they're going to go based off what they decide. And they're like, I don't trust this town. Let's get back on the boat and let's go right now.
Oh, I've had that.
And how do you handle it?
Well, you better make sure you have some impromptu scenarios ready. Sometimes I never want to railroad them back to the location, but sometimes I have had communications with them like, hey, I can throw something down, but it's not going to be as fleshed out as I had it. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Like, it's where I call a GM break.
Yeah.
And, like, if you want to do this, that's fine. I'm not fully prepared, but we can work something out.
I think that's a great conversation that I know. So I don't know how you run the table, but for me, there's definitely a certain amount of Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. I'm behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. I'm doing lots of magic. And the players don't know all of the work it takes to deliver a fleshed out,
Yes.
not just a fleshed out world, but also a story with like arcs and recurring villains and small bits of lore
Yes.
that all the characters seem to know about and kind of drop little pieces of. Like, it takes a lot of work to do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to know how much work it is because I want them to be immersed.
Yes.
But I think that it is entirely fair, even in that kind of game, to say, hey guys, if you just want to play and you don't mind it being a little bit more crunchy than normal, then we can play the rest of the night, but then tell me where you're going to go or tell me what you're going to do, and I'll have it more fleshed out.
Exactly, yes.
For the future. Or if you want to give me a break, then we can play a board game. Mm-hmm. And I think it's great to have like easy, fast board games ready, because sometimes people cancel and you're like, this game was going to be entirely around that person's character.
Oh yeah, that's happened.
Let's play role-playing. Let's play a board game instead.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But giving the players that decision, not necessarily telling the players, because I think that I can always throw monsters at the players. There's also a cheat that I think is a great technique when they go from one location, or they avoid one location. You're like, okay, you're going to head into the town, and the guards, they look at you and they seem unduly happy for you to be there. And they want you to come in, and they say, hey, no, like no cost. You can just come in. You don't have to pay anything. And then the player's like, hell no, let's get out of here. Let's go to the next town. All right. Well, I can just lift up the entire contents of that town, minus the suspicious looking guards, get them into there. And then boom, the players don't know any the wiser.
Exactly. GM tricks.
GM tricks. If they kill the captain of the guard that you never even said his name, he was a lieutenant, and now the captain's still alive and pissed off that his lieutenant was killed. The lieutenant never existed before. Mm-hmm. Now he does, and he's dead. That's where you really, because I think you want the players immersed. You want the players in their head, closing their eyes, imagining this is what I would do if I was a vampire in this scenario. Mm-hmm. This is how I would behave. And they behave that way. And you then have to close your eyes as GM and think, okay, I'm the waitress in the tavern, and they just said this to me, and my brother owns the tavern. He knows about this stuff. I would answer or point him in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And, I role playing through this scenario, and the players get to just be the vampire.
Yeah.
Just be the werewolf or whatever. But the GM has to be all the characters. Mm-hmm. And if suddenly while you're closing your eyes and you're like, okay, so I'm going to respond with this tidbit of knowledge that I didn't think the waitress knew, but since the waitress is the sister of the bartender who does know,
You on the fly create these
you
links.
start thinking about it. And then suddenly the players is like, and then I bite her and I rip out her throat and I drink all her blood points. And you're like, wait, what? No, what? I already started fleshing out this scenario and now my character's
just building
dead.
This character.
And if you liked that, you have to really step back a moment instead of be like, this player is a constant problem. He's always doing this. He's always interrupting. No. Breathe and be like, all right. So the cook is the sister to the bartender and knows this stuff.
And it's never a bad idea. Like I said, I do call a GM break where if they've thrown me off the books, hey, I need 10 to 20 minutes to refocus and create something for you. I just need that break. And that's where my gambling games come in. I just give the players the gambling games and let them deal with that while I refocus everything.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. So, did you have another scenario you wanted to share?
More like a little tip.
Okay.
So if one of my player characters, inevitably, always will be, is a thief or likes to do these little things, they like to steal things, even innocuous things, I take little notes and I add it to their character sheet that's in my binder. And one of my player characters in the very first scenario stole the jacket of a passed out drunkard in the tavern. That's innocuous. That's nothing. Mm-hmm. And I spent 6 scenarios working on this storyline that afterwards that player, they ended up taking the drunkard with them on the first mission. He dies. The captain steals his coat. And one day he's in a marketplace and a young boy runs up to him, grabs that coat with his hands and says, "How do you have my father's jacket?" And I had built that very important thing from this tiny little thing that he did. Every time he stole something, I just make a note of it, put it in the book. And when the players do small things, maybe they do something kind for the school teacher in town, means nothing.
Yeah.
However, later on, I can create, this rumor mill now. Those players are known to be kind, so somebody else will come to them with a quest. And it's those little tiny things. I make notes, I put it into their character sheets, and then I can look through that on my off time to try to come up with something to do with that.
I think tracking those basically like non-role based actions by the players and then responding to them in future games. And I think it's the most powerful if you can just, I know you have like, you're a GM and you have a great idea and you're like, this would be so clever. Like he stole the jacket and then the orphan's going to ask like, how'd you get it? It's so much more powerful when you wait.
Yes.
2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month.
And he had already magically modified the jacket, so it was even better for me because he had no idea what I was planning.
Yeah.
And then the orphan ended up being a changeling / mortal, so then they had to convince him to basically come with them on the ship. They never told him what actually happened to his father. But it created this little, like, tiny little thing that he didn't think I'd do anything with, but then I created something more with it.
That's awesome. All right, so I think, unless we have any final words, we end it right there.
No, I think we covered all the good points.
I had a couple other stories, but that's so good. Let's just end it there.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, everyone, make sure to either subscribe on your favorite podcast app or go to our website, behindthegmscreen.com. Yes, I sometimes can remember it. Hopefully you can too. All right, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.